Matzliach. We are in the Parshiot of Acharei, Mot, and Kedoshim, a double Parsha. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen the videos of how in Eretz Yisrael and in different places, they're doing outdoor minyanim and like figuring out how to do it. And I just had this feeling this week when I saw a picture of this outdoor minyan in a courtyard, and I saw that one of the men were bringing a Sefer Torah down from the shul to come into the courtyard to be read. And I saw the Sefer Torah and I thought to myself, wow, my heart started to pound. I miss our Sifrei Torah. I miss the Torah, and I'm not somebody who goes to shul often. I probably wouldn't have seen a Torah since Pesach until now anyways. But imagine our poor Sifrei Torah alone in shul. I hope the rabbis or whoever is going into the Beit Midrash, at least they open up the Aron and give the Sifrei Torah a kiss. Imagine how lonely they are. Imagine how sad they are that no one has read from them yet. And we're at a double Parsha now. And we're in this tekufa, we're in this time frame where we're journeying now towards a goal. We're going now towards what we want. And so the parshas that we read now, Hashem is telling us the way that we can get there, the way that we can reach our goal and get to what it is that we want to get to, finally where it is that we feel like we've arrived, like we've gotten to our destination. So what is this idea of Kedusha? At the end of Parshat Acharei Mot, there is a mitzvah, a negative mitzvah, where Hashem tells Bnei Yisrael, do not act like the ways of the Mitzrim, the Egyptians. Do not act like the ways of the Canaanim, like the people living in Israel, the Canaanim. And over there, Rashi tells us, what does it mean, don't act like them? And he answers, Be'inyane arayot, in the ways of immoral, immodest relationships between men and women. Do not act like that. The Sfat Emet says, then the pasuk could have just said, do not act immorally, do not do arayos, like the Egyptians and the Canaanim. Why is it giving us purposely something vague that we have to then define what exactly was it that the Torah meant? And the Sfat Emet answers, because what Hashem is telling us, in addition to the fact that avada, for sure we shouldn't act in the improper, immoral ways, like how the Canaanim and the Mitzrim do, but more than that, that we shouldn't act in their ways, period. Even in the things that are mutar, that are permissible. And so therefore, there are a lot of things that Jews do just like the Goyim, except we need to do them differently. And so it says that just because it's allowed for you and it's allowed for a Goy, doesn't necessarily mean that I should do things the same way the Goyim are doing it. And we're now living in a total double standard, right? Every week that goes by, we see the Alma de Shikra, the world of falsehood, the world of lies, slowly start to dissipate little by little in front of us, starting from every level that we have, that everything that we thought we could trust or that we thought we could believe in, really, other than Hashem, is slowly, it becomes crazy for anybody to think that there's a chance to believe in anything else besides Hashem. And so as the Alma de Shikra, the world of lies, is slowly getting chiseled away, the world of reality is coming out. And there are people who are very upset about the double standards. Well, you know, if the Goyim are out and they're whatever, how come it's okay by them? But immediately we're going to focus on the Charedim and this and that and the other. And the truth is that whatever politics, but stop for a minute thinking about the actual politics of it. Step back and realize what Hashem is telling us. Hashem is essentially telling us, we're just doing what the Goyim are doing. But guess what, my beautiful little children? You're held on a higher standard because you're kadosh. We are holy. And so even though there could be things that would be mutar, permissible for us to do, and you look out at the world and you say, well, the world does it. There's a Jewish way to do things. It's not just, I have to know what's allowed and what's not allowed, but within what's allowed, what's the Jewish way to do it? Okay, so practical, Amit. What can I do to show Hashem this week that I want to do things the Jewish way? I want to be kadosh. I don't want to be like the Egyptians and the Canaanim. What's the way to do it? And so Chazal bring down overwhelmingly that one of the biggest areas that we can work on in terms of Kedusha is with eating. And so how a Jew eats very much defines their level of Kedusha. So we're going beyond what's kosher and what's not kosher in this discussion. This discussion is, obviously, we're assuming you're eating everything 100% on the highest levels of kashrut. But how do you eat? There's a story of the Rebbe of Zitomir that he went to a tish on Friday night, and on Friday night he went to hear his Rebbe speak, and this was when he was still a young boy. He went to hear his Rebbe speak, and the Rebbe was talking about Kedusha and eating and breaking the ta'ava of eating, not being so, when I'm starving, to scarf the food down, and how one could eat in a way of holiness. And the Rebbe said, obviously that doesn't mean that you shouldn't eat. We need to eat. But how can I do something so that when I eat, I do it b'kedusha? And the rabbi expounded and gave chizuk to the Hasidim. The next day, this man is at Kiddush now, the Rebbe of Zitomir, when he was a young man. And he had finished davening, Hasidim daven late, and all of a sudden the hot kugel is coming out for Kiddush. And it smells amazing, and he's starving. And so he runs to the table. Many of us have seen at Kiddush, if you remember when we used to be in shul, what Kiddush looked like. He runs to the table along with everybody else, as if we haven't seen food in so long. And he runs to the table, and he takes a big piece of kugel onto his plate. And then he remembers, you know what, last night we were talking about a Kedusha in Achila. And he says, I'm not gonna just stuff this into my mouth in one big scoop because I'm so hungry. And what does he do? He goes and he finds himself a fork and a knife, and he starts to cut the kugel into pieces and eat it slowly. He's gonna still finish the whole thing. He's not saying I'm not gonna eat, but he starts to eat it slowly. As he's cutting it into pieces, he feels his knife hit something firm, and he pulls out a needle that must have fallen into the kugel batter. If he would have just scarfed it down and then run for the next piece, what would have happened? He would have swallowed that needle. He would have swallowed it, and God forbid, he would have gotten really hurt. And he realizes that this mandate of Kedusha and his desire to take on Kedusha just saved his life. And so as Jews, we say brachot before we eat. Why? Because the bracha is supposed to slow us down a little bit. But listen to this. So Biderman brings down that when we have al hamichya is the after blessing that we say for mizonot, for any wheat products. So cookies and cakes and anything that's not bread, but that it's a wheat product. So we say al hamichya for. And in the al hamichya, we say b'kedusha u'v'tahara. We bless Hashem and we say we want to be able to come to the Beit HaMikdash and eat b'kedusha u'v'tahara, in holiness and in purity. Why is it only in the Al HaMichya verse, in the Al HaMichya prayer, that we ask Hashem to eat in holiness and purity? You don't have it in Berchat Hamazon, and you don't have it in Borei Nefashot. What is this idea of saying, I want to eat in holiness and in purity? And so says Rav Biderman, because when a person is eating mizonot, specifically mizonot, a piece of cake, a cookie, they quickly say the bracha mizonot, and then it's sugar, it's a taivadik of food. And so what happens? They might eat it around the house, they might not realize how much of it that they're eating, and they can eat a whole cake, can eat a whole bag of pretzels, can eat a whole big thing of mizonot without realizing, I just had a meal, without having to slow down a little bit. Unlike when you eat bread, When you eat bread, you have to wash netilat yadayim, you have to sit down, you have to make sure there's salt on the table, you have to say hamotzi. So there's more time to remind yourself, eat b'kedusha u'v'tahara. Eat with holiness. So by mizonot, since there's taiva, since there's a lot of desire in eating mizonot, Hashem put this special bracha to remind us, make sure that even your mizonot is b'kedusha u'b'tahara. And then it's funny because there's a Hasidish minhag to try to say a mizonot so that you could say an al hamichya often, to remind yourself, to daven that I should eat b'kedusha u'b'tahara. But that's funny because it kind of leads to all the rugelach and the pastries and everything that we have. So we have to be careful that when we want to say the brachas and we want to eat b'kedusha u'b'tahara, we're not lowering our standard. For me personally, one of the best things of quarantine is that, I mean, my kids are eating so much healthier. I don't have to worry about junk food. I don't have to worry about where they're getting it from. We're all eating healthier. Everybody is eating what there is in the house instead of wondering, what are they getting from outside? What are they getting from school? What are they getting from family members? What are they getting from b'kedusha u'b'tahara? Can we make our homes, again, clearly Hashem has shoved us into our homes in order to say, work on them, create mini batei mikdashim, create mini temples, mini shuls, mini batei midrashot. How? With the way that we eat. Can we take this Shabbos, Acharei Mot-Kedoshim, and say we are going to be conscious of our eating. Our brachot are going to be in order to remind ourselves the kedusha u'b'tahara, that I can have oneg, but I'm not going to scarf it down. I'm not going to eat it fast. I'm going to eat it b'kedusha u'b'tahara. So how do we get to kedusha level 1? Through our eating, through our blessings before, through our blessings after. Another way, a quick way to attain kedusha. This is like the kedusha shortcut method. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us that and this was from last week's Parsha, when the Mitzora, when somebody who gets tzarat, somebody who speaks Lashon Hara, first the tzarat goes on his property, then on his clothing, and only then it goes on his actual guf, on his actual body. Hashem likes to give up before he actually hurts the body itself, before he affects the body itself. Hashem likes to give a warning to the person to try to get it, to take it out on the clothing and the property before he actually takes it out onto the person himself. So likewise, it's brought down that if, God forbid, Chalila, a person has a gezerah on them, a person has an evil decree upon them, for whatever reason it might be, whether it's because of who they were in a previous Gilgul, whether it's because of the sins that they committed, whatever the reason that this person has a gezerah, has a negative decree come upon them, God fills out that negative decree in a very specific way. The first way that he tries to pay up on this negative decree, that he tries to get out this negative decree, is on a person's kavod, on a person's honor. Somebody embarrasses you. Somebody makes you feel bad. Somebody hurts your feelings. It doesn't hurt your body physically, and you actually don't lose anything financially. Now, of course, from a mental health perspective, you can get broken. Everybody knows sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And the other girsa, the other version is, but words can hurt me more. But on a level of emunah, when someone offends me, if I believe that everything is coming from Hashem, and I believe that it was good for me, and this is the best therapy a person can ever have, instead of feeling the anger and the hurt and the shame and the humiliation, you say, yo, Hashem just gave me a gift. My honor, my kavod was blemished. My health is intact. My bank account is intact. Everything else is intact. My feelings are hurt. But who hurt my feelings? Hashem. Why did he hurt my feelings? Because he loves me. Because he doesn't want to hurt anything else that's going to remain with a permanent scar. And then all of a sudden, the emotional pain doesn't remain with that permanent scar anymore. Because I know that it's coming from Hashem. It doesn't hurt me anymore. I don't look at the person who hurt me and say, you hurt me. I can feel the pain and I can process it, and one must process the pain. But the easiest way to get rid of suffering is through kavod. Let's say a person says, no, I will not relinquish my kavod. They said something to me. I'm going to make sure to say something back to them. I will put them back in their place. I won't let anybody step on my toes. So then what? And you're makpid on your kavod. You're very careful with your kavod. Then what? So Hashem says, okay, if you need to be very strict about your honor and how people are going to treat you, then I'll affect your parnasa, your livelihood. So you get a ticket, or you get, an extra charge here or an extra charge there, or somebody's kind of ripping you off, or you didn't realize the hidden fee, or whatever it is. Again, the same thing with finances. Sometimes you can fight it and you could say, no, you have to get that back. No, I have to have that back. That person owes me money. I must get that money back right now. I will make sure that I get that back. Now, again, everybody has to do what they have to do. But realize that when I'm losing money, all of a sudden now the dishwasher breaks, the washing machine breaks, the door frame falls apart, you have to pay out money. You should do it with a dance, because Hashem is taking the gezerah away from money. So again, that's something that we all know, right? Everybody knows when they get a ticket, we say, okay, kaparat avonot. But if you understand what that means that, no, there was supposed to be a gezerah on me. Something negative was supposed to happen to my guf, my body. But because Hashem made me lose money, now my body is secure. Parenthetically, this is really one of the main mechanisms of how tzedakah works. So tzedakah, when we talk about giving tzedakah over your obligation of ma'aser, when we talk about giving tzedakah to a point where there's mesirat nefesh, where it hurts, where I don't necessarily have this tzedakah to give, and I would rather spend it on something else. At that point, when you spend the tzedakah, then Hashem says, that's cancels out. It's mevatel gezerot. It cancels out gezerot. And that's all of the stories. And I'm not going to go into that now, but we've had some big stories that my husband and I have been personally involved in, where people have had some big sufferings going on, and they gave tzedakah beyond their means. They gave tzedakah in a way of mesirat nefesh, and they saw literally nisim v'niflo, literally miracles happening. Again, because losing money has an ability to cancel the decree instead of it being taken out on a person's body, God forbid. So again, am I giving the minimum that I have to give? Am I making sure that it's just, am I researching where I give? One of the most important things to do is to make sure that when you give, let's say $150, if 120 of those dollars is going to take care of other things, and only 30 of those dollars is actually going towards tzedakah, so we got to be careful about that. So again, to err on the side of caution, to research the organizations that we're giving to. Obviously, somebody needs to pay for the salaries of different people. That's also part of the tzedakah of the organization. But to make sure, really, what's the bookkeeping like in the organization? Is the bookkeeping for the PR, or where is it? Am I giving at least to some places that I know that my dollar is really going to where it needs to go? So again, we're in a time where there are people who need help. Can we step up to the plate? Everyone needs help, each one of us as well. Can we step up to the plate and be the helpers, even if it's a pinch, even if it's a little bit tight for us? There's a famous story of Rav Baruch of Mezhevazh, who was, let me just see, there's a question. Why does Hashem make himself so hidden for us to try and figure out what the suffering is caused by spiritually? Very good question. And the answer is because that's what makes the game challenging. That's what makes us really want, where God says, do you really want to find me? Why does he hide? Because if he would just give it to us for free, if he would just tell us exactly what it is that he wanted, maybe I do want a relationship with God, maybe I don't. But if he hides himself, and I still search for him, that's how I not just show him, but show myself that a relationship with Hashem is something important to me. So Rav Baruch of Mezhebazh was a big, big tzaddik. People used to come to him from all over in order to get blessings. He was a known miracle worker. And he was one time coming into a specific town. And the townsmen of that town were so thrilled that he was coming and making a visit over there. They came outside to the outskirts of the town, and they were waiting for him to escort him into the town. And all of the important people are there. And Rav Baruch of Mezhebazh comes with his horse and chariot, and he sees that all of the townspeople, from the wealthy and important, and then you have the less wealthy and the less important, they're all waiting for him. And then there's one guy who's sort of like ostracized on the side. Nobody is around him. Nobody is near him. And it's as if nobody is letting him come to be with part of the cloud. What was the story of this guy? This guy, 20 years earlier, was accused of doing some of the most horrendous sins, of some really, really disgusting things. And the town, being very, desiring of Kedusha, wanted to show we will not tolerate these very non-holy acts to be done in our midst. And so what they did was they took him and they rode him around the town, shaming him, having people throw things at him in order to make a show. We will not tolerate lack of holiness in our very pure town. So after that happened, obviously nobody wanted to go near this guy. He's the guy who's the big Baal Aveira. He's the guy who does all of these terrible sins. And if that's what we know about, imagine what we don't know about. And so Lamaisa, this man has lived for the last 20 years in this town, and he's an outcast. Rav Baruch of Mezhebazh comes into the town. He sees all of the important people, all of the wealthy people. He sees this man who's ostracized, and he looks at that man, and he points to him, he signals to him, and he says, come into my wagon. So everybody's like, yo, why is he going into the wagon? And nobody knows what they're talking about. And Rav Baruch is telling this man, what's your name? Who are you? What's going on with you? And asking some questions, ascertaining what kind of a person he is. And then Rav Baruch, the famous tzaddik, asks this outcast, can I stay in your home for my visit over here? And of course, this man he's elated. Can you stay in my home? You would choose to be it would be the biggest honor if you could be in my home. And all of the townspeople are thinking to themselves, of everybody, he's going to stay in that Baal Aveira. He's going to stay in that man who did such terrible Aveiras. He's going to stay in his house. And that's where he's going to see people. And people are coming to get brachas from him in the house of this outcast. And one evening, after all of the people left, Rav Baruch turns to this outcast who is his host and says to him, listen, tell me, what can I give you a bracha for? And the man is hemming and hawing. He's not answering. And Rav Baruch says, tell me something. Do you by any chance have a child in Shidduchim? And Rav Baruch said, and the host, who's the outcast of the town, says, I do, I have a daughter. And Rav Baruch says, I have a son who I'm looking for a shidduch for. Would you like to be mishadech with me? Would you like to be my in-law? Would you think we should make this shidduch? And this man, to get a shidduch with Rav Baruch of Mezhebazh, to get a shidduch, his son is going to marry his daughter. There's nothing more precious than that in the world. And of course, he immediately agrees. And word goes out in town. The holy tzaddik Rav Baruch is making a shidduch with this outcast. So some of the Gvirim, some of the important people in the town say, it must be that he doesn't know who this guy is. And so they go to Rav Baruch and they tell him, 20 years ago, so-and-so happened with this guy. Everybody found out about it, da-da-da-da. And at that point, Rav Baruch turns white and he says, I can't believe it. I have to do more research into it. And he goes to, I forgot the name. I forgot the name of the rabbi, but there was a rabbi who was alive, also a very big tzaddik, who was alive 20 years earlier. The rabbi had since passed away, but his almana, his widow, was still alive. So Rav Baruch says, you know what? If this happened 20 years ago, I need to get an account from somebody who was around at that time. And he says, unfortunately, that rabbi, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. He's no longer amongst the living, but I'm going to go to his almana. I'm going to go to his widow. And he goes to this woman and he says, listen, I agreed with this man who's my host, the outcast of the town, to be mishadech with him, that I should take his daughter as my daughter-in-law for my son. And what's the story with him? I heard some terrible things that happened 20 years ago. So the widow turns to Rav Baruch of Mezhebush and says, now I know that you're really one of the great tzaddikim of the generation. So he's looking at her and he's saying, what? What do you mean? She says, let me tell you the story. 20 years ago, they took this man and they falsely accused him. It was someone else. It was not him. And they falsely accused him and they shamed him publicly. They ruined his reputation and he didn't say anything. And my husband and I were looking out the window and my husband turns to me and he said to me, you should just know he is zacha. He is pure. And he's taking the shame as a kapara. And only the greatest tzaddikim of the generation will be able to see that in him. So for 20 years, I've been waiting to see what's going to be with this man. And she says that, and now Rav Baruch says to her, you know, I have to tell you what happened. When I came into your town, I looked at all the chashuva people and I saw this man on the outside of everybody, and I felt this very, very deep desire. I want this man to be related to me. There's so much kedusha radiating out of this man. I talked to him while I was speaking to him in the carriage. He was radiating kedusha and everything. I just said, I want to be mishadech with him. I want him, his child, for my son. And now I see why I had that feeling. And he goes out and he tells it to the whole town. And of course, this man is now exonerated. Now, does that take away the pain of 20 years? No, it doesn't take away the pain. But Kedusha, and I don't know, please Hashem never test me like that, but a shortcut to Kedusha, if you want to get it easy, I think this is definitely easier than breaking our ta'avat achila, than breaking our desire for food, is to embrace shame, is to embrace that busha. It's a shortcut, it's a ticket. My friends, we've all heard the stories when somebody gets embarrassed and doesn't answer back, then you go and you get a bracha from them. They're not just stories. These are not just like nice things that happen. No, this can happen between you and your relatives that are living with you, that are not living with you, between a boss, a coworker. Someone shames you and you keep your mouth shut. Someone shames you and you hold it. Someone accuses you and you go through it. You know, this was who David HaMelech was. We're marching towards Shavuot, Lag BaOmer, we're going to hit first, but eventually Shavuos. David HaMelech went the whole beginning of his life an outcast from his brothers. They would come to him and they would accuse him of stealing things, of breaking things. And you know what David HaMelech used to do? He didn't say, no, I didn't do it. He would go and figure out a way to fix it. He would raise money and pay for it. He took the shame, and what did that do? It gave him kedusha. Of no one do we say still chai v'kayam. He's alive and existing, and we're waiting for his great-great-grandchild Mashiach to come. How did David do it? He did it by embracing shame. So we want kedusha. Number one, how we eat. We want to bless you, God. Slow down a little bit, eat mindfully, maybe avoid something. You want something so bad, wait 2 minutes before you have it. Little by little, break that ta'avat achila, that desire for eating. Number two, shame. may nobody be shamed, right? Lo lidei nisayon velo lidei bizayon. We don't say, God, please don't give me bizayon. We say, Hashem, don't put me in the hands of bizayon, which means don't let me be drawn down into shame. But if shame happens, if it occurs in your life, if you get embarrassed, if you get offended, shortcut to Kedusha, shortcut to holiness. So what can we do now during this time of Sfirat HaOmer to inculcate within ourselves exactly what it is that Hashem wants us to acquire? And so we had earlier this week a day on the Jewish calendars called Yom HaAtzmaut, a day where some people celebrate in different ways the miracles that God made by giving us a homeland in Eretz Yisrael. And there is a whole spectrum of thought on it. But L'maisa, at the end of the day, Yom HaAtzmaut, the day that God gave us back Israel. And ladies, just be very, very clear. What is the core of Judaism? How did Judaism start? It did not start by Matan Torah. Yiddishkeit started by Avraham Avinu journeying to Eretz Yisrael. Lech lecha, God says. God says you want Kedusha. God says you want holiness. You want a relationship with me. Lech lecha. It started with our pursuit for Eretz Yisrael, for the land of Israel. I heard that after this whole thing with Corona, that the agencies of Aliyah, of people coming to Israel from Chutz La'aretz, that they got 100,000 inquiries of Jews wanting to come to the land of Israel. Somebody sent us a video of their family, some family members that we have in Israel, and just seeing the video of them, they were singing, and just seeing the video of them, it made me realize, whoa, I miss Israel so much, and I totally understand the Chazal. There's a ma'amar, there's our rabbis tell us that somebody who lives in Chutz La'aretz, somebody who lives outside of Israel, is ke'ilo ein lo Elokah. It's like somebody who doesn't have a God. And you know, anybody who's really been in Israel and who's been in the Eretz Yisrael of Kedusha knows that when you're there, there's a certain longing and truth for God. And then you come out and you're here and you get so caught up in the minuscule minutia of life and politics and shtuyot and nonsense. So Eretz Yisrael, this Yom HaAtzmaut, falls always during the Omer and always near the Parshas of Kedusha. Why? Because I think that Hashem is telling us, what does it mean to really acquire Eretz Yisrael? What does it mean to really have the land of Israel? How do we really get the land of Israel? Yes, Hashem gave us a taste, a flavor. Now Jews can travel there. Now Jews can go there. Now we can live there. But it's still not Eretz Yisrael of Kedusha. It's still not run by the Holy Torah in its entirety. So it's still just a taste. How can we really get Atzmaut? How can we really get our true independence in the land of Israel? And I think Hashem is telling us by doing what Jews do during the Omer. During the time period of Sfirat HaOmer, we are working on ourselves to make ourselves more ethical, to make ourselves more moral, to make ourselves more honest, more ehrlich, more caring. Oh, but isn't it enough? We're doing so much already. It's never enough. More. Until we have the Beit HaMikdash, it's not enough. We can tap ourselves on the back and say, good for me, I have begun, but my work is certainly not over. I haven't reached it yet. I'm not in the Holy Land yet as it's supposed to be. Let's see. I'm thinking if we should skip something. Okay, we'll skip this piece. We had Pesach, and Pesach was when God says, it's Nisan, it's a time of miracles. I'm going to rip open, we spoke about it, rip open Shemayim and show you and reveal myself to you. And one has to expect miracles. And you know, there's the famous story of Rav Moshe Feinstein, who, when it was the second day of Rosh Chodesh, because the first day of Rosh Chodesh is always the last day of Nisan, the second day of Rosh Chodesh is the first day of Iyar. When it was the second day of Rosh Chodesh, Rav Moshe was always seen at Arvit sighing, like his shoulders would droop a little bit. And they asked him, and they said to him, you know, after a few years, they realized it wasn't just one time, but this is a thing. On the second day of Rosh Chodesh, Rav Moshe visibly becomes saddened. And they asked him, what's pshat? Why? And he said, well, because I expected that in Nisan we were going to be Nigal. I expected to be able to see Mashiach in Nisan. And I think all of us this year were able to maybe get to a taste of that level, that we expected it. Now, again, not to be confused with, if he doesn't come, then I'm going to lose my faith and I'm going to go off the derech. No, I said we're supposed to expect things. We're allowed to hope for things. And we're also supposed to be okay with being disappointed if they don't come. That's part of emunah. But to make myself vulnerable enough to expect him to come. And I think that many of us were able to get to that, particularly this year, more so perhaps than any other year. He's going to come. It's going to happen. And then Nisan came, went, and we're now in Iyar. And what happened? Where was Mashiach? And so it does get a little bit difficult to think like, so Nu Hashem, now what? Okay, so when is the next time it says that it's an opportune time for Mashiach to come? And I was really thinking about it. And then I was realizing, wait a second, what actually happens to Bnei Yisrael? What happened to the Jews when they experienced that Geula, when they experienced Yetziat Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt that year? So think about it for a minute. They left Egypt, and it was incredible, cosmic miracles going on. They're traveling, and then they have Kriya Yam Suf. Yo, they're going through the Yam Suf, crazy. Look at all these miracles. Wow, totally stimulated by all of the miracles. And then what? And then God says, okay, so now you're in the desert, start traveling. But where are we going? Just travel. But what are we doing? Trust me. But how long are we going to be here? God says, when the cloud gets up, you're going to travel. When the cloud settles, you're going to settle. But how long are we settling here for? God says, you don't know. Just follow the cloud. And sometimes they were there for a day, for an hour, and sometimes they were there for months. And Hashem put them through this whole nisayon, through this whole test where, in a sense, they were quarantined. They were quarantined in the Anan, within this cloud. Yes, there were people who went out, and that was how Baal Peor even happened, and all different kinds of things. But in essence, they were quarantined in this cloud, really without understanding exactly where they were going and exactly what they were doing. And that was what Hashem was saying. The Jews of the desert were called Dor Hadeya, the generation of intellect, the generation of knowing, of knowledge. And God was telling them, Dor Hadeya, my generation of knowledge, your greatest fact that you will ever know, that you will ever, Zizi says to me, Ananei HaKoved. Exactly, that's beautiful. Ananei HaKoved. We're in the clouds of Koved. And Hashem says the greatest knowledge that you will ever acquire, if you really want to get the Torah, is that you don't know, is that you have to put yourself into my hands, that you have to trust me, that you have to go in my path. And that's where we are now. And that's where Hashem says to us, what were you traveling in the desert? What happened? You built the Mishkan. And we all know the famous pasuk of the Mishkan, which the Mishkan is the miniature Beit HaMikdash. What was the pasuk of the Mishkan? Va'asuli Mikdash V'shachanti betocham. God says, make for me a mikdash and I will dwell amongst you. And the famous question, make me a mikdash and I will dwell in it, not amongst you. What does that mean? And it's because God is whispering to us and he's saying, you know what the prerequisite for the real permanent Beit HaMikdash is? It's when you make yourself a mishkan. When your table, the way you eat, is like the mizbeach. When you are like the Kohen, when you clean your house, the Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash, they used to fight for the honor of taking out the garbage. When you clean your house, do you feel like the Kohen? Can you say when you're preparing the foods, Hineni muchanu mezuman, I am preparing myself to do like the avoda of the Beit HaMikdash. You are a mishkan in your thoughts. Do you know what the thoughts are? The thoughts are your kadosh hakedoshim. What are your thoughts like? Va'asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. My friends, Hashem is telling us clearly, make yourself. This is about the work of the individual. This is about you when you're stripped away from everything else. You are not a persona anymore outside. You don't have all of those extra trappings. Who are you when no one's looking? Who are you when everything else has been cut off? And I don't know how much longer we're going to have this. We must not get burnt out. We must take advantage of where we are. We must take advantage of this idea that we are in the Ananei HaKuved, that we are in the clouds of Hashem's glory, and to say, am I losing it? Or am I becoming a mishkan? Am I complaining and becoming petty and wondering about the politics of everything? Or am I realizing that this is so beyond medicine, so beyond politics, so beyond everything, because nothing in medicine and nothing in politics is making sense right now. You have nobody to trust out there. Obviously, Hashem is generating this for me to become a mishkan, for me to become a place of holiness. Judaism, and we're going to end with this. Our destination in these days is Har Sinai. Is Shavuot. Pesach starts with the destination of reaching Matan Torah. Our lives start as the Jewish people with the destination of Mashiach, of bringing God's glory into the world. But the destination is not the ikar. The destination is not the main point. In secular society, the destination is if you've made it or not. But as Jews, it's about the journey. How did I get to the destination? And I had this beautiful thought that just like, where did our Judaism start? With Avraham Avinu being sent, Lech Lecha El Artzecha, being sent to Eretz Yisrael. How the Kedusha, the holiness of the land of Israel, is so integral to who we are as a people. What happened when Avraham finally gets to Israel? When Avraham gets to Israel, there's a famine, there's a ra'av, there is disaster, and he has to leave. And he goes to, and he's traveling again, now down to Egypt. And he says something so strange to his wife that would be so offensive, I think, to most of us if our husbands would say that to us. After years of being married, he sees Sarah's reflection and he says to her, Hinena yadati ki isha yifat mar'e'at. Now I know you're beautiful. And of course, there are many ways to explain it, but one of my favorite ways is that Avraham Avinu said, you know, Sarah, you and I started our life together with a mission. And we knew exactly where we were going, and we knew exactly how we would get there, and we had all of the tools, and we had everything planned, and we had a promise from God himself, like it was stamped. And then we got to Israel, and we left. And we're not sure where we're going right now. And we're journeying. But you know what, Sarah? You haven't lost it. You're still the same woman. You still have that inner strength, because I realized it didn't matter to you if you knew where you were going or you didn't know where you were going. To you, it was the same. And that's beauty. because you felt like you were in the embrace of God. And so, my friends, Hashem should bless us with the ability to have that beauty in our travels. Whether we're traveling to work on how we're going to eat, whether we're traveling to work on being able to take a little bit more offense and shame from people and to not be as sensitive as we are, whether it is that we are working towards higher levels of emunah, to building our own mishkan, to be surrounded by the ananei hakavod, to understand that everything is coming from Hashem. Yehi Ratzon, we should retain our beauty, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should smile at our beauty and say, I want you. You've built your Mishkan, and now let me give you your Beit HaMikdash. Thank you so much.